Hey, Double Springs Youth, it's Austin. I'm back again here with When God Brings the Storm. We're continuing the story of Job. Like I said, this is probably going to be in three parts. So this part's going to cover a large part of the book because the majority of the book is Job's conversation with his friends. And there's a whole lot you could probably spend. I could probably spend half a year to a year just on the book of Job, just diving into every single response by each friend. There's different responses. There's multiple responses by each friend, and just kind of understanding, the struggle that we see here. But we're just gonna kind of, we're gonna dig into as much as we can in the next 10 minutes. So, just a quick recap. Up to this point that Job starts talking to his friends, Satan came to God and said, I've been roaming the earth, and God's saying, okay, well, have you tried my boy Job? And so he says, well, Job worships you because he has everything. And he said, okay, well, you can take everything from him, but you can't take his life. So he said you can't touch him. So he does that. Satan, makes all of these things happen. Job loses his wealth, he loses his crops, he loses his livestock. As we know, that's it's the same now as having millions of dollars. And he loses all his children die. They're all having this party and this feast in their house, and the house collapses on them. So he's lost everything. It's just him and his wife. Then Satan comes back again, and God says, where you been? He says, I've been roaming around the earth. He says, well, have you tried my man Job? He said, well, he still worships you because you won't let me hurt him. So God says, okay, you can bring him pain, you can do whatever you need to do, but you cannot kill him. Excuse me. So Satan goes back, brings boils on Job, and he's in just in an insane amount of pain. So that's where we're at right now. So Job calls his friends over. And, a lot of people, when they talk about Job, they make jokes about, make sure you have friends better than Job's friends. And on this, when you read it, Job is very upset. And by the time he finishes his conversation with his friends, he's condemning his friends. He's telling his friends that they're terrible, they're worthless, they're not helpful at all. That they are, they are mocking. He uses the word mocking him multiple times. They're mocking him. They they're just not, their advice is just not helpful to Job. But I think, if we look a little bit deeper, I think this is a great example of where we can find ourselves in our friendships. And we can put ourselves in either situation. We can put ourselves in Job's situation, or we could put ourselves in Job's friend's situation. But we're going to talk a little bit more about why this is such a relatable story and why it looks like a friendship would look in real life. So what's really interesting here is a point that a lot of people, when they talk about Job's friends being unhelpful and being terrible friends, they don't really mention this part. And this is something that would be almost impossible to have your friends do now. Yes, I know, just because of work schedules and stuff, but just think about it. If you had the time to do this, could you do it? Could you be the friend? Or do you have any friends you think could do this for you? So we're going to talk about that. It's in chapter 2. They come, Job's three friends. We have Eliphaz, Temanite, Bildad, and Shuhite. When we have Eliphaz is the Temanite, so it doesn't matter. So we have Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Just so we don't have to say those crazy names over and over, we're going to say Eli, Bill, and Zoph. Okay? So we have these three friends, and it starts in verse 12. It says, when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. So here we see that maybe they're not so bad of friends. They're already empathizing with him. They're already feeling his grief, and they haven't even talked to him. They have no idea what's happened. They have no idea what's going on, but they know their friend well enough that when they see him, they don't recognize him, right? We talked about he's in the sackcloth. He has tore his clothes. He is weeping. He's probably filthy, and they don't recognize him. They know that something terrible has happened. Something crazy has happened to him, and they immediately start grieving with him. They immediately start trying to bear his burdens. This is what Christ calls us to do. We need to bear each other's burdens. So that's a positive for them. So then in verse 13 it says, then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. So for 7 days and 7 nights, an entire week, they sat with him and no one said anything. Complete silence. Right? And it's a struggle that I have personally, and a struggle that a lot of us have, is when someone comes to us and they just want to talk to us and they just want us to hear them. They don't want advice. They don't want us to talk back to them. They don't want us to give them suggestions. They just want to talk and have you hear them. Sometimes they have to talk things out to kind of understand and comprehend what's going on. And so sometimes they just want us to be silent. Now imagine a friend asking you to be silent for a week, right? And just sit there with them. You can't talk, you're not talking to anyone, you're not doing anything else, you're sitting there with them in silence. Just imagine that. Could you do that? Right? I mean, that is a difficult task for us to do. And or put yourself in Job's shoes. Imagine you had friends that were willing to come and sit with you for a week and not say a word, and they were grieving with you, and you have no idea what has occurred. So then we dive in, starting at chapter 3, through the process of Job talking with his friends. And we get this back and forth. Job talks about how he is just distraught, he is depressed, he is grieving, and he doesn't understand why God has done this. He must have done something to deserve this. What is this issue? And then he gets all of these different responses from Eli, Zoph, and Bill. Eli's first, and then it's Bill, and then it's Zoph, and then they just kind of keep going in this rotation of talking to him. And Job continues. I mean, this is all the way, if we keep going here, we keep flipping through the pages, it's all the way to chapter 27 that this conversation is happening. So we have 24 chapters of this in-depth conversation between Job and his friends, and Job is venting. Job is struggling, right? And one of the times he says, I wish you would just listen to me. He calls them mockers, and they all respond differently. Sometimes they blame him. Sometimes they blame God. Sometimes they are telling him that he's overreacting, or sometimes they're telling him that it's going to be okay. Some of them are saying, one of them says, well, you must have done something wrong. See, what makes this so relatable and realistic is that these friends are looking at this guy who is faithful, who is one of the most faithful followers they know, who is still not cursing God or, condemning God. He is just battling with this issue. He's battling with the stress and the terrible events that have happened to him, and they're taking on his burden. They're empathizing with him, and when they're bearing his burdens, they are wrestling with it just as much as he is. And that's a beautiful thing to see, because his friends are truly trying to comprehend as much as they are, and they're confused. They don't understand either. They're trying to, wrestle with this. What's going on? What is happening? Why did this happen? What did you do? Something? Did God do something? God works, and God does what he does, and there's a reason why he did this. And Job's like, stop giving me advice, just listen. Just encourage me during this time. That's what I want. I want you to encourage me. And, they're just trying to continually solve this issue. And that's where we all come short. We all find ourselves in Job's friend's place. Is when we have a friend, especially like a best friend or a true friend, and they come to us, they just want to vent. They just want to talk to us. We want to solve the issue. We try to give them advice, and sometimes they don't want that. I know in relationships we do that. In my marriage I do that. I still do that with Amanda, and she just wants me to listen to her, not try to, give her all of these suggestions. So there's a tip for you guys and girls. If you're in a dating relationship, sometimes your significant other doesn't want to hear you talk. They don't want advice. They just want you to listen. Just to kind of wrap up this session, and we'll the next video, we'll wrap up the book of Job, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more at the beginning about his friends. But just know that this story is real. This is a this is how I know that this story happened, is because it just really, it resonates. It's realistic. It shows the emotional and mental and spiritual struggle these people are going through for loss. And then when they're, when they're empathizing and they're bearing his burdens, they're going through the same struggles. They're trying to figure it out just as much as he is. And so that's an encouragement to us. We should be encouraged by this and say, they sit in silence. We should sit in silence. We should listen. They're bearing his burdens. We should bear our friends' burdens. So, yes, Job's friends had some terrible advice. It didn't help. And a lot of times they should have just listened. Right? But we can take so many examples from them and use that in our friendships. Be the person who's there willing to listen, bear each other's burdens, empathize, grieve with your friends, even if you don't fully understand why they're upset. Okay? And obviously in this situation you would understand. But there's some situations your friends are really upset about something and you don't understand why, or a lot of times there's another piece to the story that you don't know. Right? And we shouldn't try to investigate and figure that out. We should just, we should be there. We should listen. So I just want to use this story today to encourage you to do that. A lot of times we've just been digging in the story, but there's a little bit of application. Be like Job's friends in the thing of listening, right? Let's take the positives from there. Listen to them and just encourage, right? Sometimes they don't want advice. Just listen and encourage and bear each other's burdens. Okay, so like I said, we'll wrap up this book next week, and we will jump into something else the following week. But all right, guys, we'll see you. We'll see you later. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to text me. All right, and if you don't have my number and you're watching this video, it's 704-477-7498. Don't hesitate to text me, and we will be back next week with the finishing of Job, and we're going to Zoom tomorrow at 6:30. Okay, we'll Zoom tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. All right, we'll see you soon.